Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation, DFL 52. Saturday, June 8th, we are privileged to have the mayor of one of our sister cities in Senate District 52 from Mendota Heights, Stephanie Levine. Good morning, Madam Mayor. We are privileged to talk to you. It's a real pleasure. As I think you may have picked up, this is a conversation, so people raise their hands in the chat box, and we can fire questions at you, and hopefully they will all be softballs. But you never know with this group, especially given we have some other government officials with us. I usually start off by letting our guests say hello, introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about you, tell us anything in particular that's on your mind, politically or otherwise. So, floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. It's my pleasure to be here. And I just want to acknowledge I know quite a few of the names here. I don't want to embarrass anybody by leaving anybody out or calling anybody up if you are my friend, but you basically, I know a number of you. So I just want to say thank you and thank you for being here. There's a number of elected officials. I just want to call out Jim Carlson for this past legislative session. Things didn't quite go the way Mendota Heights wanted, but actually a lot also did go the way Mendota Heights wanted. So I'm happy to talk with you about the results of the legislative session from the point of view of a mayor. And I'm sure the city council members from Eagan would have something to say about that as well. Mendota Heights is just a lovely, lovely town. It's located, we've got about 12,000 people located at the confluence of the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. So I always say that we have probably one of the finest locations in Minnesota to have a city, but it also comes with great views, comes great responsibility. Every drop of water that falls in Mendota Heights will find its way into the rivers. So I think we have a special responsibility to really practice sustainability. And that's something that I'm really proud of our city for doing a lot of work in the sustainability realm recently. Like most cities, our budget is about 50% public safety, and I'm really proud of the police and fire departments that we have in our city. We have a volunteer paid on call model, which is pretty rare these days, but we have about 36 of our residents who serve our community in terms of fire, and we have a modest size police department of about 21 officers who really have an outsized role in the state. Many of you know our police chief, Kelly McCarthy, who has served as the head of the post board, but many of our officers, not just her, but also our captain, serve really in regional and statewide leadership roles in terms of how policing is done in the state of Minnesota. And if you want to know how policing can be done better, I do think that Mendota Heights is a really good model to look at. As Senator Carlson knows, our police station is in bad shape. That is one of the reasons why I was a little disappointed by the legislative session. We were asking for about $11 million to redo our police station in City Hall. That did not, as many of you know, the bonding bill didn't pass, nor did our request for funding. But in terms of me personally, I came from the school board. I served 7 years on the ISD 197, that's Mendota Heights, West St. Paul, and Eagan School Board. Before that, I'm an actuary by trade. I spent 15 years as an actuary. I raised 3 kids in our school district and got involved in the schools that way. Kind of like, I feel like it's little sister to Bianca in some respects, because we've had a similar sort of path in terms of our love of the schools. And when people approached me to run for office when I was involved in a levy for the schools, as Tom Weisbecker, who's listening, knows. And it took about 7 people to ask me to run for office. I think that's average for the League of Women Voters. It takes about 7 people to ask a woman to run for office. I had never run for anything in my life. I do not consider myself a public speaker. I never publicly spoke before. I never ran for anything. But I did run for school board because I was convinced by people outside of my group that my leadership would be appreciated. And once I was elected, it turned out that I really do enjoy the work. And then after 7 years serving, a group of individuals approached me about running for mayor. I had been on the Parks and Recreation Commission, so I knew the city extremely well. And of course, the school board member, I did too. So I wasn't going to wait for 7 people to ask me. I called the current mayor, Neil Garlock, who I respected, who I had a great relationship with. And I said, Neil, I don't know if you're planning to run, but I'm planning to run. And he said, he said, I'm not planning to run. And he ended up endorsing me. For those of you who know Neil, he is not of the Democratic variety. He is of the Trump variety. But that's the beauty of nonpartisan politics, which is the space I play in, which is that you can find commonality with people who think very differently with you on many issues, but you can also find areas to agree on. And I do feel like I have really worked to build those bridges. For those of you who know me politically, I do not talk as mayor. I don't come to these meetings. I am a nonpartisan office holder. But anybody can look, people, when I door knock, they say, well, are you a Democrat or Republican? And I say, I'm a mayor, which is nonpartisan. But if you want to know who I donate to, that is public information. Any of you can look it up and see that I donate to strictly Democratic candidates, including many of those who are on this call. I am a huge, huge fan of our elected officials. Liz, I don't know if she's on here yet, Jim, Matt Klein, Bianca, Mary Frances Clardy, who she has been just a godsend to our district. We have the most unbelievable representation in our city. And I am so proud of the candidates that we put forward. Angie Craig, if I don't mention Angie Craig, I mean, she is amazing. So I am really, really proud of the representation that I personally have as a resident of Mendota Heights, all the way up into the national level right today. And I hope it continues on to the future. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my city. Popcorn me. If I don't know the answer to something, which believe me, I don't know all the answers, I'm happy to find out the answer for you.
Well, let me start out by saying that your public speaking skills are not deficient in any way. You do quite well, at least in a Zoom crowd. So congratulations for that. And with what you have said, you have covered the entire outline that I have of questions, although I'm certainly going to go into greater depth. Let me talk about the police station for a second. I have come across a function called community project funding. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, but I'm
It
taking
used,
notes.
I'm sorry?
I'm taking notes, so
Okay.
I will find out what that is.
It is a federal function. It used to be called earmarks, and now every congressperson and senator has the ability to recommend in the federal congressional appropriations budget certain projects for their communities. I know this because I'm trying to raise some money for a nonprofit organization in your neighboring city, West St. Paul. And I have come to learn that private and nonprofit organizations are not eligible for community project funding, but municipalities are. And they are run by recommendations of your congressperson and your senator. And so I would encourage you to reach out to Angie Craig and Senators Klobuchar and Smith and see if you can fit into their community project funding list, not for this coming fiscal year, but the deadline is something like spring of 2025.
Okay,
And
yeah, I'll put a pin in that. We know about that. And Angie
okay,
Craig has actually, she has toured our police station, said it's one of the worst ones. It's the worst one she's ever toured. And we are working with Madeline, her staff member, to get
good.
national funding. So yes, but thank
Good.
you for
All right,
that.
you know about that one. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So let's get a little bit bigger picture and let's put Jim Carlson on the spot and talk to us about the things that the legislature did that you're happy about and what happened to the bonding bill from your point of view and what other things the legislature needs to do on behalf of cities, specifically Mendota Heights. Let's expand on that subject. Mayor, why don't you start? Tell us what your thoughts are on, and I think you're muted at the moment. There you go.
Wait,
Tell us your thoughts on the legislative.
you want me to
Go
tell
ahead.
Jim Carlson what he did wrong?
Um, that's a nice way of putting it. Sure. No, you can say, these are the things that I really wish we would get that we haven't gotten yet.
Okay. Okay, so that's just awkward for me because Jim Carlson and I have a great working relationship. Jim, the senator sponsored our bill in the Senate. So I'm very thankful for everything he did. Unfortunately, Jim is not king of the world, and so is unable to make things happen until we change our form of government, which I really hope we preserve in the next election. We are a democracy, so Jim can't do what he can't do. He did everything he possibly could, as did all of our representation. But in terms of the legislative session as a whole, one of the things I have always been concerned from with as a school board member and now as a mayor is the preemptive nature of some of the off years. We have a trifecta government, and God, I love Democrats, but sometimes there's a lot of overstepping and preemption into other spaces that I just think the legislature does not belong. Some of the zoning stuff that came forward in terms of this year, some of those zoning preemptive regulations are challenging. We zone and we plan our cities with our infrastructure, and then to have it kind of preemptively changed by the state legislature is very difficult. The same thing with in the school board, the unfunded mandates. You have these wonderful ideas. You might fund them for a year, and then the funding doesn't even keep up with inflation. So we talk about how over time the unfunded mandates erode the ability of some of our institutions to actually get their work done in an effective way. So I do appreciate that we did not have a lot came up and was discussed, but most of that preemptive sort of language never made it through into law. So I am very appreciative of, and I don't even know where Senator Carlson stands on this, because we also have robust disagreements, he and I, in really good, positive ways. And I'm one of these people that I will shoot from the hip. I will not, I have my ideas of how I believe something should work or doesn't work, but I am very you can educate me about anything. And I will often change my mind once I get educated. So, but I will fight for what I think is right, regardless of how it will politically cost or not cost me. I'm just, that's how I work. So I, in general, was happy. I will tell you that the House did put $1.4 million of our bonding request in there. It got to the House did have a bonding request, $1.4 million, which was really generous and kind, but was 10% of what we asked for. So I'd like to go back to the drawing board. We need the tax capacity of our city. We simply don't have enough people to tax them to the point that we can build a $20+ million police station. So I need help in order to keep not just my community, but we are at the crossroads of 62, 494, and 35. Everything that happens from east to west in this country and north to south in this country goes through Mendota Heights. And we do punch way higher than our weight. So I consider our police department to be a state resource. And that's why I'm asking for those resources.
Jim, I wonder if you have any thoughts.
Yes, thank you. And the mayor is absolutely correct. And we did get some money into the cash bonding bill, let's say the cash construction bill, because it wasn't bonding. And that was the bill. When you hear anybody in the media talking about a bill that missed by 30 seconds, that's the bill. And that money got in there because of some threats that we made to the bonding chairs. So they told me right away that they would not fund anything for police departments. But then we came back and gave a little bit better story that that represented what Mendota Heights means to the region, and they did slip in some money. It was, really small, but it was to get started. And unfortunately, that was the bill that the filibustering in the Senate caused to be late. We had to get those. We had to get those. I think it was several bills, 6 bills that went into that omnibus bill at the last couple of minutes. And I don't know if anybody has really looked into the sequence of that yet, but it was really a terrible outcome in view of the chaos that everybody reported, but it was a good outcome as far as getting some important bills into that omnibus bill. So we have another year, 2025, we're going to start out from where we started out. And, that money or let's say the capacity to do construction is just bills to next year. And so we're hoping that that's going to be another year where we could perhaps go after this money that Mendota Heights needs and desperately needs, and getting all of the people up and down the representative listing here to get behind that and get an investment that is really critical. And when the mayor talks about the police department having a lot of shortfalls, she's not kidding. It's very, very, I don't want to say anything bad about it, but it needs work. It needs help right now. So the
Well,
mayor.
I wonder whether the city has its own bonding authority for such a longer term infrastructure proposition. Doesn't necessarily have to be funded out of current cash flow. Can the city raise its own money through bonding?
Yeah, the city has bonding authority. The problem, as I see it, is tax capacity. So we have a certain amount of authority, but we also can't double our residents' property taxes for city expenses, which I don't know if it would double. I have to look at the numbers. I've run the numbers several scenarios, but they don't look good. You can raise taxes. Believe me, I went from a school board. Anybody who's served on a school board knows you don't have taxing authority. And then you become on the city council and you're like, we can tax, we can bond. It's so much fun. But you can't do it at an unreasonable rate to your population, because you have to be incremental in your so yes, I would definitely be looking at we would be actually doing at least half ourselves, and we would use our bonding authority.
Okay. Cindy Devenish, I see your hand is up. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir, and thank you for this opportunity for this important discussion. It's really concerning that right now there's a city, that is desperately in need of public safety more than ever. We need public safety to keep us safe, and I support your need. I don't know if I found on Deed that there's Small Cities Development Program, which is a state program that provides grant funds into 3 categories, and I did put it in the chat for housing, public facility grants, and comprehensive grants. And it's up to 600,000. So maybe one of your staff can apply if possible, or contact Deed to see what are the requirements. And
Mayor, are you
it.
aware of those programs?
The Deed, the housing and public I wrote it down. I'm going to be honest with you all that I have, I'm the mayor. I am not a staff member. My degree is not in city administration or in legislation. I just play one on Zoom. So I will just throw an email after this to my city administrator, Cheryl Jacobson, who really is an expert in this area. She actually worked in housing before she came to work for a city. She actually worked in the housing space, in community development and housing for low income individuals for the county. So she's usually, whenever I give her these, do you know about this? It's a little bit, she already knows, but I will mention it to her again. And she's very patient with me, which I really appreciate.
And
so
I did put
very
it,
much, Cindy.
I did put it in the chat. So if they have any
Yep.
questions, then they can contact Dee directly.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that information, and I'll let our city administrator know. Thank you for that, Cindy.
Well, Mayor, one of the other subjects that you mentioned in your opening remarks was sustainability, and I have two categories: sustainability and environmental climate issues. We can combine the two of those. Why don't you expand on your thoughts about those issues, what you see as your role and the city's role in improving sustainability, environmental, and climate issues?
Thank you for that question. That's really, if people ask me, like, what's your biggest passion? It really is moving our city along that trajectory. And we are just so fortunate to live in Minnesota. We are fortunate to live in a state that I do believe takes climate change and sustainability and caring for our environment and being good stewards for the future generations seriously. But frankly, none of us are doing enough. We are not even close to where we need to be. So when I think of sustainability and caring for our environment, the first thing we did when I was elected, I'm in my 4th year serving. Oh, by the way, I am running for re-election, just in case people ask me, are you running? Yes, I am.
That was my last question on my list for this morning. So now I have to figure out.
You know what? And I'm one of these people, I'm not cagey. I'm not like, oh, I don't know. You know what? I love the job. I got a lot to do. I'm gonna run for it's a 2-year term.
Right.
I've served 4 years, but 4 years ago, when we elected a new council, one of our biggest really areas that it was actually during the pandemic, but one of our biggest areas was sustainability. And we have created the first thing we did was we needed guidance. And we have an amazing community of experts. So we have a natural resources commission that we put together. So they're in their 2nd year. And we have some of the top experts in Minnesota living in Mendota Heights, serving as a resource for how do you tackle sustainability at a scale that isn't just about our city, but is really about our region and really can serve as a example for our state. So, right away, our plows, we've switched our plows. When we buy a new plow, we do not use salt. We minimize our salt use. We use brine. We just bought brine plows, and then we have these little plow naming contests. So it's named Kerplow, and we're going to have a second brine. So brine solution is laid on a street before a snow or ice event, and it minimizes, it's a fraction of the salt used. Because we know that our water goes into the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers. So we want to, in fact, I think that every city along the corridor, the Mississippi or Minnesota, any river corridor should be only using brine plows, not salt. So we use brine plows. I think that's and that's how we also talk about, we don't just have our natural resources. We pay for full-time staff. We have a natural resources and a recycling coordinator in our city. That is extraordinary for a city of our size. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, but we look at how we are journeying together as a community. So how we look at sustainability. So we have our staff and our commission that leads us in this work. We also have a natural resources management plan. So we're looking at everything in our parks from controlling invasives to educating our community on how they can plant. We were the 2nd pollinator friendly city in Minnesota. Mendota Heights was, people don't know that. We are also a tree city, and we're also a 3rd level green step city. So we actually have these sort of paths in place to bring ourselves to a better place. But then we really listen to our community. We're a small city, so we're able to have our residents help us out. So, just this year, one of our residents who is doing her master's degree in public health for her master's project decided to work within the city and come up with this idea of Fresh Air Fridays, which is really an initiative to bring people along on how do you become more sustainable. How about on Fridays, you don't use after your kids come home from school, you don't use your car, you do your organic recycling, all of the things that you can do you do plant a pollinator friendly garden, all the things that you can do as an individual within the larger community, that we are being intentional by making it every Friday in the summer. And we're having parties and we're having education things. We also are the highest number by, I think, 3 times in Dakota County for people who participate in organics composting with Dakota County. The number is not high enough. It's 18% registered. It's probably about 25% of our population because many people don't register. But our goal is to have us be the first city in Dakota County to be doing curbside organics collection, which will drastically increase the number of people who are doing their organics, who are participating in composting. So again, and it's not just Mendota Heights is a very small city, but when we do something, I think it can spread. I mean, I'm really looking at climate change as all of our responsibility. So how can we do things as a community, but really work on becoming a larger, doing it as part of a larger community where we're all on the same journey together. And many of us are at different places. Have learned so much from my community members about, I was planting things in my garden that turned out to be invasive. I had no idea. And so we have to not shame people for putting in things that they don't know about, but hold their hand and walk the path with them so that they can do better in a way that makes them feel like they're actually doing better, and making them feel good about those decisions. So we all can make conscientious decisions on how we live our lives to make our community and our country and our world more sustainable. That's our goal.
Tom Wickheiser raised a question in chat, which was really my next question as well, and that has to do with electric vehicles and charging stations. I think Tom's chat message had to do specifically with high-speed charging stations. Where are you at with that issue?
Yeah, so we actually have that. That's one of our goals, is to increase the number of EV charging stations that are available to the public. And there's some challenges in that right now, because we are in the process of trying to figure out how to do that. And so we have city areas, like city parking lots can be a really great place for EV charging stations. My family, my husband drives a Tesla, so we are always looking for EV charging stations. So apartment buildings, we have a number of apartment buildings, and they simply do not have EV charging stations. So putting that in code, making sure that you have EV charging stations for people who live in high density housing, that's a huge challenge. And so did you say Tom Weisbecker? Because I'm pretty sure that sounds like a Tom Weisbecker question.
Tom Weisbecker. Yeah, he wrote in chat.
He's my neighbor. Yeah. And so Tom.
Okay.
It indeed was Tom Weisbecker.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Julie too. So yeah, we are in the process. You haven't seen anything yet, but that doesn't mean we haven't been working on it. But we have our public works director working on that as well. That's one of his charges, to use a pun.
Well, as part of that question, it raises the issue of police and fire vehicles and whether they're going to be EV or at least hybrid. What's the status of those?
So we have right now to get one of those, like our public works. So one of the things I forgot to tell you is, in a small government, when I was out talking, we had a Touch a Truck event a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to our public works employees. We have about 13 public works employees. And I was just asking them, they're younger individuals. And I said, tell me about, like, why are you working for Mendota Heights? And one of the reasons they loved it, and one of the guys in particular, Nick, who everyone loves, he runs our garage. We have actually this amazingly talented and gifted, and I'm not giving you his last name because I don't want Egan to steal him, but he's a gifted fixer. He fixes everything. And we have built for him a garage. So our police vehicles, all of our vehicles can go to Nick as opposed to going to the shop. And last year when we had all that snow and people's plows were breaking, including ours, instead of going to a shop and losing our plow for 3 weeks, Nick fixed it in the public works department. So what we do is we have this city that we don't have silo. We really break down silos. So if you were working in public works, there's a good chance you're working with our parks and recreation people and our police and our sustainability. We all integrate with each other and talk to one another, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It makes everybody happier because they're not just doing the same job, and they're also welcome to bring their ideas, cross-pollinating, if you will, our different departments. So you were asking me about, wait, now I just lost my train of thought.
We were
Go
talking
back.
about EV vehicles for police and
Oh, for
fire.
public works. So what happened is so in our budgeting process, we talk about the kinds of budget items we're going to need in the upcoming year. EV, so what we are we have a plan to switch over some of we're looking at potentially police vehicles are a really good choice because we're a 10 square mile city. We're a small city, so we have a lot of short trips. So EV charging police cars is something we're going to be looking at. And then we can look at EV in terms of some of our public works and obviously our sustainability people should be driving EVs. So we're looking at those kinds of things, but we yet have, right now it's a little bit difficult. Some of the purchasing abilities are somewhat limited for Mendota Heights. So we are looking into it. And like I said, if you look at us and say you're not doing anything, no, we're having the discussions. Government, when they say things move at the speed of government, it's usually not a compliment, but we are working towards, it's a long-term path that we're on, and we are definitely looking towards changing over our fleet and getting all those charging stations and working with our public works and Nick to get him trained on all the EVs, because he will be the person fixing all those things. So
But you better give Nick a raise, because Mike Sapina, Egan councilman, is already looking to find him
yeah,
and
no,
talk to him.
you know what, he don't, please keep him with us. But Nick is like, you know, it is also about investing in people and paying we had one of the things we did this year is we had a compensation study, and a large tax increase went because we were underpaying some of our people. And so I really believe fair wages in this kind of work is critically important, that you can't be afraid to spend good tax dollars to get great people to do great work. It all comes back in a wonderful cycle. You are not going to win any friends or make your city run any better by chinsing out on how you pay and benefits for your employees. So thank you, Lynn, for that shout out. I see you clapping, but you're right. We have to pay our individual, we have to pay our city workers fairly. They work hard and they work really smart.
Mike Sapina, your hands up.
Yeah, just want to throw in, I promise we won't steal Nick from you, but yeah, just double down on what you're saying. The staffers are like solid gold. You know, you can't run a city without competent staff. And, you know, we have the same thing. We have wonderful staff here in Egan, and every time one of them kind of, you know, finds a position somewhere else, we mourn a little bit because we hate losing them. You know, they really do keep the city running. So I'm glad you have a great mechanic there, and I hope he stays there a long time.
Yeah, and Egan, I know, has or had at least a wonderful forester. I think his name is Adam. And I was involved in some tree planting programs for a while. I'm familiar with the Green Step program, at least a little bit. So I'm delighted to hear, Mayor, that you and Mendota Heights are involved in that. I want to bounce over to Jim Carlson, because Jim, you had a comment about EV charging stations I saw in the chat.
Yes, we've had, maybe Mike knows a little bit more about it, Councilmember Sapina, that I've been approached several times about the use of the charging stations at the Egan City Hall, and I looked into it, and there was a prohibition of providing those for public use because of the grant funding that was used to put them in. So I don't know all the details about it, but that was the answer I got, because some people did want to use the Egan location to charge their vehicles.
Yeah, I don't know much more about it than you do, but I've heard the same thing, that we can't use them for public. And actually, we have run into a situation at one of our buildings where folks from the nearby neighborhood would just drive their car over there at night and just leave it plug their car in overnight and come get it the next morning, which of course isn't exactly, you know, great either. So yeah, there still needs to be some of the fine details worked out as far as how charging stations work when they're on public property like that.
Gary Hansen, you have a comment in this area.
And just in reaction to what Senator Carlson said, we've actually talked about this, because I have gotten questions from residents about, well, you know, why can't we use those charging stations at the community center. And Jim gave the answer to that, but I guess I'd like to ask Senator Carlson any prospects for any legislation to address that issue.
There's not any that I'm aware of right now, but you know, that's something that the energy committee does want to address. So there aren't any answers, but there certainly is interest. That's for sure. And you know, we do have the investment plan that is working on placing chargers, and right now the only answer they have is trying to put chargers on the major thoroughfares through the city or through the state. So they're dedicated to the I-94 and 90 and 35 thoroughfares. And there's still money left for that. Unfortunately, we had a meeting on Thursday to discuss part of that, and I was on an airplane going to Kansas City at the time, so I don't know the most recent answers on that. But it's in our minds. It's definitely in our minds.
Elizabeth Lamon, you have your hand up. Elizabeth? You're on mute. There you go. Elizabeth? There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, Stephanie. I just wanted to, I posted a question also in the chat. We've seen a lot of stories and articles about the chaos at local government. And I'm wondering, have you seen any of that? And what are some of your thoughts about how to inoculate us from that, and also how to reverse that really disturbing trend? Thank you.
Well, Elizabeth and I must read the same articles in the paper. It was in the front page of the Strib yesterday, if anybody read that article. And then yesterday, I have these mayor walking groups. So I'm in two of them. One of them, Dave Napier and I started when I was elected. He's the mayor of West St. Paul. So it's him, Dave Napier, Jimmy Francis of South St. Paul, me, and Brenda Dietrich of Inver Grove Heights. So we have a little mayor's walking group. We meet quarterly. And yesterday was our quarterly meet over in West St. Paul. And, you know, I just love these little chats you have with people when you're by yourself in a parking lot. And Brenda, nobody knows this, but I'm going to tell you this. Brenda, I don't know her politics. I have no idea. She's a newer mayor. She is running for re-election. She did not get, there's no primary election, but she does have one opponent. And she said, but she looked at me at the parking lot and she said, but I'm scared. He's not opponent to be like, to do public service. He threatens her. He's threatened her. He has been inflammatory. He is not a problem solver. He's just out there to make waves. And she said, so I have to run this very strange campaign where most likely I will be reelected, but I have to worry about my public safety. I have to worry about my safety while I'm in the public. We saw that article and we've seen what's happened. So Mendota Heights first, that's what I know best. For those of you who follow Mendota Heights politics, it's been about 2 years now. I was actually a mayor for a year when an apartment complex, a developer came up with an idea for an apartment complex. And I had also been, and that just inflamed my community in ways that I had never expected. And our meetings got incredibly contentious and people were quite vociferously cruel to both me and my family online. So I have seen that, and and we're not, so I guess what I want to say about Mendota Heights is we are no different than any other community. When temperatures get inflamed, we have a very small vocal group of people who will come to our council meetings and be inappropriate. Because we've had this in the past before me, we always have our police chief at our meetings. And because our police chief is so incredibly well respected, people generally have good behavior. And I will, so when something happens that's inappropriate, generally I watch my chief of police come from the back. She sits in the back of the room. One of the reasons we need we need to have some, we have no alternative, or a gunman could come in and mow down everybody in the room. We have one entrance and not even like a barely second exit. So we have like safety issues in our city hall police department. They're connected. But I have watched her bring down the temperatures while I'm conducting the meeting from the front. So Elizabeth, so the one thing you can do, or one thing you have to do, is tabletop exercises as a council, is how do you deal with those people who are coming in? Now, what you can't deal with is the people sitting on either side of you. And I've had that as well. When one of my fellow council members is inappropriate, I am trained, and I have trained myself to bring down those temperatures, but I can't stop a fellow council member from being inappropriate. And I have struggled with that, because when people are watching the screen or the TV recording, often if I'm speaking, then the camera's coming to the front. And one of the things I've always said is my criterion is a 8-year-old student should be able to watch my city council meetings and come away thinking that government is solving problems. But sometimes when I've heard the things that going on either side of me, that is not what's happening. So I consider it the mayor's job to do better. And I take responsibility for the behavior of my fellow council members. One of the things somebody said to me is, how come you never lose your cool? Like, God, I saw what happened. You've never lost your cool. And I said, because I've had the best training possible. I'm the mother of 3 children who were teenagers at one time. You know, you never, as soon as you lose your cool, you've lost the argument. So I'm very, very careful about how I behave. And I hope that that's an example. I also will call people up if I see something inappropriate online or at a meeting. I will call up people afterwards and say, I would like to chat with you about what happened online. I would like to chat with you what happened at a meeting. And often if I call a person, it's like a parent calling a child and having that small talk, they're effective, because people realize, I'm like, we're here to solve problems. We're on the same side. We may view the problem and solution differently, but we're on the same side. We're trying to solve problems. So let's give each other respect. And Elizabeth, I'm frankly scared for November. So again, I wish, I don't know. And it's one of the things that truly scares me about our community, because I am seeing the fractured, I'm seeing the edges of our political spectrum growing, while the center is shrinking. And it scares me. I want us to reclaim the middle. And part of what I do as a community member is I say, I am a centrist Democrat. If somebody asks me if I'm a Democrat, I'm a centrist. We need to reclaim the middle, because frankly, the middle is where most of us reside. And when I'm out talking to people, I know people don't care about the fringe issues. When you talk to people and knock on doors, they care about, they're reasonable and moderate. And that's where Minnesotans reside generally. And that's what we need to reclaim as a community, is that center. And we need to own it, and we need to love it and grow it. And that's your job as a DFL group. Like, that's where you should be. If I were to give you guys one ask out of today, it's grow the center. Don't listen to those voices, those small voices that are loudest in the room, that are trying to get you to do something that is pushing you towards the fringes. Own and love the center, because that's where I think most of your base belongs and lives. And that's what we need to do to heal, to be honest.
Well, Mayor, we could probably talk about this subject for days, if not weeks. But in 90 seconds, I'd like to ask you, as well as the other electeds on our call today, because you see more people and you see more people from all sides than I do. I watch television, I read newspaper polls. I don't believe newspaper polls. Is the minority, particularly the fringe right, large? Or is it just loud? What's your sense?
It's really loud and it's not as big as we think it is. And I'm going to say it to the left as well. We saw a lot of that happening. We've seen a lot of that happening in both sides. Like, I mean, book bans. Book bans are happening on the right, and then they're also happening on the left. We talk about this all the time. I think we just have to be very cognizant. And I saw it, and it was a nonpartisan with the apartments. That loud small group was 40 people that showed up and emailed and wrote letters to the editor constantly, but it was the same 40 people. And when I was running for election, my opponent ran on that issue, the apartment issue, and he was defeated just to the ground. Because I think what happened was, as soon as people saw that bad behavior and they heard, people actually reacted the opposite way. I remember there was a crazy letter that went out saying, if you vote for Stephanie, they can subdivide your house and put apartments on your house, whatever. So somebody wrote this letter and sent it out. And to me, and about me and one of my candidates. And I remember lamenting this letter and talking to my daughter, who's 27, she was 25 at the time. And she said, "Mom, this letter just gave you the election." And I said, "Why? Tell me more about that." And she said, "Because anyone that reads this letter about the negativity and the things that they're saying about you is going to actually, if they were going to vote for the opponent, which by the way is a nice guy, people like him, he's very well respected in our community, they've now turned over to you." And that's exactly what happened. So I think we shouldn't cater to what we view as these fringe people who answer all the polls, who talk to all the pollsters, knowing that the people that you're meeting at Walgreens are thinking just like you.
So if it's loud but not large, what scares you?
Because they show up. They show up and they claim the righteous indignation on both ends. And what happens is it silences those of us who just don't have it's hard to be a centrist advocate, because to advocate for normalcy is just not cool. It's not fun. There's nothing specific. It's a really hard space to claim righteous indignation when you're like, just be normal. Just accept the fact that like you may not get everything you want in life. Like you actually do have to compromise, and that there's gray area that we need to embrace, and that people are both right and wrong. We want to be right, or we want to be right. But like in that centrist area, you actually are never just right. You're both right and wrong at the same time, but you're more right. Does that make sense to you? That it's just it's a hard sell, especially to young people like my kids' generation. I have worked on creating centrists, and I've created only 2 out of 3. One of them she's pretty far left, and I'm working on her, but I get it. She loves that righteous indignation where her friends are. It's really a fun space to be in. But it doesn't solve problems. It makes me feel good in the moment.
Let's talk about a problem. I want to shift gears for a minute and cover a subject that we don't have a lot of time left, but we could again talk all day, and that's housing. Several different things jumped out at me as I was reading in advance of this. One is a notion that the available land for multi-family housing is all used up in Mendota Heights. That's one issue. There is the Aspen House Shelter for Youth that you're talking about. There is a short-term rental ordinance that I believe is going into place. And then there's another property called the Bourne property, and I don't know if that's housing or otherwise, but you want to keep that undeveloped. that's an unrelated litany of things, but they're all sort of housing related. You want to speak to those?
Yeah, we're generally, you've touched on too many things for me to talk about in 5 minutes, I suppose. I'm happy to have a discussion with anybody on any of those issues. I'm intimately involved with them as well. But the reality is we do have 2 apartments that just went up. We have a 3rd apartment that's on hold because of interest rates. But again, it should be marketed towards the younger, less, it's not a luxury apartment. It's a less one, but I had a walk yesterday with the mayors of, South St. Paul, West St. Paul, and Inver Grove Heights. Mendota Heights is not an island. It is a community within a community, and there's a lot of shift between our cities. We're in the same school district as West St. Paul. So when West St. Paul's put in, I think Dave's like over 1,000 units. We're seeing an explosion of growth over in both of our towns, but I do think that with the vacancies going up a little bit, most of the vacancies are pretty low in our towns. We need to kind of see where our community ends up, but we know that we have housing shortages. We know that homes are extraordinarily high. People can't afford their first home. So we are working on affordability as best we can, with the understanding that Mendota Heights is not an affordable housing city. It is a fully developed bedroom, luxurious city next to other cities that aren't. So we have to own, and I do not pretend to say I'm going to be building huge blocks of affordable housing in Mendota Heights. That's just not who we are as a city. We're already fully developed, and that's not how the city was developed. But those availabilities are available. We do have that availability within 10 minutes of our city. And we have to own that as much as we may, we do have a homeless youth shelter right in my neighborhood too, which that just opened up. That's about a year old, which we've had issues with, but we're working through those.
Well, it kind of begs the question of the short-term rental ordinance. I believe Egan has one. I know in my cul-de-sac, we now have a house that is being rented on a short-term rental basis. And quite honestly, I and my neighbors are a little concerned about the maintenance of that house because it is renters and the owner lives in Seattle. What's the status of your ordinance, and is it working? And what do you think about that?
We don't have an ordinance yet. We had a work session 2 weeks ago on it. 2 weeks ago, don't get me, well, we just had our second work session on it. We're going to be doing a short-term and a long-term rental ordinance. We're working with both VRBO owners and the community of next to VRBO. We have one house that's just a huge problem house. So what we're doing is trying to make it so that we don't have party houses, but at the same time allowing people to rent and their homes in a reasonable way that works for our community, because it does allow people to stay in their homes longer. And we are looking at life cycle housing as a real value in our community. We want people to be able to stay in their homes as long as they want to. And often that's because they're going to be renting. Maybe when we have a lot of snowbirds, we want that to be a possibility. So we are working on that. Our rental ordinance is in we have not passed it yet because we're still in the work session. Again, we're working at the speed of government. We have a lot of community members who are involved in this process. And by the time we end up passing something, it will be a good piece of policy, but it takes time and a lot of discussions with neighbors and people who are in that space, and what are emerging issues, long-term versus short-term. We went from having no policy to we will be having policy probably in the next few weeks. We'll have at least our short-term, and then we'll turn to the long-term. The long-term, and we will not have, one of our criteria is you must homestead your home if to VRBO it. And so that will prevent people who are living in Seattle from owning homes and renting them in our city. That's not a good solution.
Right, and I'm sure your friends from Egan who are on this conversation will have some valuable input on that subject as well. And if you'd like to ask 5 minutes of my experience, I'd be happy to share it with you offline. One of the other issues, kind of a pet issue for me, that's sort of housing related, is the airport. and airport noise. We have in my house, my wife is very sensitive to airport noise, and we get a lot of airplanes. And for a while, I was involved in the issue as RNAV was being created. And the thing about airport noise is it became a NIMBY. You know, you can have all the planes you want fly over your house, but just don't fly them over my house. And so your mayor's walk is of great interest to me because you probably share issues of that kind. Like you don't want in Mendota Heights to have more airplanes flying over your house, but you sure don't want to. The mayor of West St. Paul sure doesn't want you to push the airplanes over their neighborhood. How do you solve that one?
So what you do is we have we have an airport relations commission, so we have commissioners who monitor, and our value statement is not less noise. Our value statement is the appropriate amount for our community, meaning we benefit from being next to the airport. It is amazing to be next to the airport. We know that because we're next to the airport, we will have airport noise. However, we don't want to have more than our fair share. So what we do is we look at what is the fairness of our airport noise, and that a lot of that changes based on runways and technology. And we, like I said, we have our city administrator sits, and she chaired the NOC, the Airport Noise Commission,
Noise
whatever.
Oversight Commission.
Yeah, I don't. And you know what?
Right.
This is one of the things that, because when I ran for office, I was like, I have such good staff. We have the former head of the airport, the Metropolitan Airports Council, whatever.
Commission.
Commission, no, whatever. He's living in Mendota Heights and he's serving on our airports commission. Like, you guys figure out the problems, tell me what the solutions are, I'll advocate for you. We don't really, like I said, I just want to make sure that we have our fair share of noise, and no more and no less.
Right. Well, the amusing or not so amusing result of all of that is what you think is a fair share of noise. Those in Egan don't, and you know, trying to find that balance is very difficult, especially when you're dealing with great sensitivities. We had a small group of community members from Egan that were showing up at NOC and MAC, and I was one of them, and we made a lot of noise about the noise. And I don't know that it really ever got us anywhere, but we sure got pushback from other communities. So anyway, that's out there for whatever it's worth. One other thing that I understand you're very proud of, and that is the Oheyawahi development or project. I'm not sure exactly what it is relating to the Pilot Knob area. Can you tell me what that is? What's going on with it? What makes you so proud of it?
Okay, so thank you. You pronounced it correctly. I'm very impressed. Oheyawahi.
That's just luck.
The hill much visited in Dakota. It's also called Pilot Knob by the boat, the people on boats on the, it's at the, if you look at the confluence, it's right at the confluence. The boat traffickers, the pilots, Pilot Knob, would look up the hill and see a knob, and that was a very important landmark. The knob is gone. It's now Acacia Cemetery. But if you look at that area in Mendota Heights, including Acacia Cemetery, Oheyawahi, which is the hill right there, we have our is a absolutely very special piece of land. And I want to thank again the legislature, including Jim Carlson, for giving us $1.8 million. And Ruth Richardson did a lot of that, Mary Francis. And we got an allocation that is called the Hill Much Visited. And it is a hill much visited. It is a Dakota. It is a sacred space for the Dakota, but it's also a sacred space for all of the communities who live in the area, for every generation and for every community who lives there. And so that space, it's not a park, it's called a space. You may go there and you may reflect. It actually is, it is the path of the airplanes do come overhead. You can see downtown St. Paul and downtown Minneapolis. You can see the Mendota Bridge from it. But the important thing is it's a place to honor your ancestors. And all of us are welcome to honor our ancestors there. We have, we just had our last, we had a presentation on last Tuesday's council meeting about this, about the sacred space by our Dakota, we have an Oheyawahi task force. and which has members of the Dakota tribe, but also not just every reservation in Minnesota had a say in how that space will be utilizing that bonding money so that we can create a space that's accessible. And when I say hill much visited, it is truly a hill much visited. It is on the St. Paul Public Schools curriculum to visit that space. And right now there is not a bathroom, or like there's an outhouse, but not a proper bathroom. There's no accessibility features, and there's not even a decent parking lot. So because it's a regional and statewide, maybe even I would consider it's on the National Historic Register of Historic Places. It's a national treasure. That's why we felt that we needed that. We paid for the land. We worked on, I mean, the churches and synagogues in our community worked to save that from becoming developed. We work with Dakota County. We've gotten a lot of granting funding to put native pollinators in that space and restore it to what it once was. And what's really kind of cool, you can't bike in there, but you can walk in there and reflect. I encourage you, if you have not visited the hill much visited, you should visit it. And right now, if you're very, very astute, you may see the endangered rusty patch bumblebee, which has retaken up its home there. And so it's a very special place to reflect. And we are very proud of that, because when we talk about the land that we occupy or we live on, that was formerly land that was Dakota land. I mean, my home is literally sitting on Dakota land. How do we as a community rectify, some injustice? There has been injustice to the Dakota people, and by returning land that is the sacred land of the Dakota and including the Dakota in how that land is being used, that's putting an actionable step into how we are doing our public policy. We are creating I wouldn't call it justice, because really my home is on Dakota land. I mean, if I was really truly cared about justice, I would give my home back, right? But I'm not going to do that. But I am going to use my tax dollars, which has gone to purchase that land and to develop that land into something that is appropriate for the Dakota. And what we are hoping is that the Dakota who are exiled from this community and pushed off into the Dakotas can come back and at least visit and have their ancestors' space where they can respect and they can have that opportunity to visit with how they spiritually connect with their ancestors. And that's, I think, putting a really important, how we looked at how we right past injustices is really important to put actionable steps into place. And so I hope by doing this at Mendota Heights is really serving as an example for all of our communities of how we can right past injustices. The reality is nobody's going to be giving up their homes anytime soon, but there are other ways we can right those past injustices. And that's what Ohe-Owahi is, a small attempt to do.
The one thing that this conversation has really brought home to me is the nature and relationship of government at all levels. We can talk forever about national politics and philosophy and whatever. But when it gets down to the ground level and making things happen, where you're talking about building houses or taking care of Dakota land, or relations with your neighboring cities about noise and other issues, it's really down at the level that you and the council serve that gets. I mean, if you want to talk about on the ground actions, you're it. And this conversation has really highlighted that for me. And I'm grateful for it for many reasons, but that among them. We have hit our hour. I see people are starting to go on about their daily business. So I want to close and say thank you to you, Mayor. Do you have any closing thoughts for us?
I'm accessible. Our community, we have a great city website. We have a city e-newsletter, a weekly newsletter. People are welcome to sign on and do that. We also are on social media and Instagram. And again, my phone number and my email are publicly available. If anybody has any follow-up questions or anything they'd like to chit chat about, I am available. I generally respond within 24 hours. And so I look forward to hearing from anybody at any time about any subject.
Well, I know this group very much wants to get Democrats elected in the fall, from the mayor's race, even though it's nonpartisan, and the two city councilmen. I don't know who they are who are running for reelection and what their leanings are, but all the way up to Washington. So we'll work hard to elect Democrats to all those. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please feel free to join us in any future meetings that you would like. Gary and Mike, Jim, and Bianca was on for a little bit. Liz couldn't make it. They're usually on this conversation, so it's a good place to share thoughts. So we thank you, and everybody. The rain has stopped and the sky is clearing, so let's go enjoy another beautiful sunny day in June in Minnesota and Mendota Heights. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Ron.